Get her out of my sight. I don't care who she is. I paid $10,000 for this seat, and I refuse to sit next to her." The voice boomed through the first-class cabin of Flight 882, shattering the peaceful pre-flight atmosphere. Everyone froze. But the man screaming wasn't just any passenger. He was Alistair Sterling, a media tycoon used to getting exactly what he wanted. The woman he was screaming at. She hadn't said a word. She just adjusted her glasses and continued reading her file. He thought he was humiliated her. He had no idea that he was screaming at the one woman who could ground his entire private fleet with a single signature. This is the story of how arrogance met authority, and why you should never judge a book by its cover. The humid July air of JFK International Airport did not penetrate the climate-controlled serenity of the first-class lounge, but the tension radiating off Alistair Sterling was enough to heat the room. Alistair was a man who wore his wealth like a suit of armor, specifically a bespoke Brioni suit that cost more than most people's cars. He was the CEO of Sterling Media, a conglomerate that owned half the tabloids in the UK and a good chunk of the cable news in the US. He was 55, silver-haired, and possessed a jawline that seemed permanently set in a clench of dissatisfaction. He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus, and scowled. "The flight is boarding in 10 minutes. He snapped at his personal assistant, a young man named Timothy, who looked as if he hadn't slept since the previous administration. "Ensure the pre-boarding champagne is chilled, not the Prosecco swill they serve the tourists, the Dom. And make sure seat 1A is prepped. I don't want to see a single crumb." "Yes, Mr. Sterling. I've already called the concierge." Timothy stammered, typing furiously on his tablet. Alistair didn't wait for the answer. He strode out of the lounge, bypassing the line of weary travelers at gate 42. He flashed his Platinum Elite card at the gate agent, a sweet-faced woman named Sarah, without even making eye contact. "Mr. Sterling, welcome back," Sarah said, scanning his boarding pass. "We have you in 1A today. Enjoy your flight to London Heathrow." He grunted a response and marched down the jet bridge. This was his sanctuary. The 7-hour flight across the Atlantic was the only time Alistair could truly disconnect from the incompetence of his subordinates. He expected silence. He expected subservience. And above all, he expected exclusivity. He stepped onto the plane, inhaling the scent of leather and recycled air. The first-class cabin on this particular Boeing 777 was configured in a 1-2-1 layout, meaning exclusivity was guaranteed. Or so he thought. He turned left toward seat 1A, ready to toss his jacket to the flight attendant and demand a scotch, but he stopped dead in his tracks. Someone was already in the aisle, settling into seat 1A. Or rather, there was a mix-up. The person wasn't in 1A. They were in 1B, the aisle seat directly across from his window seat. But their bag, a sleek, understated Toomey carry-on, was currently occupying the overhead bin directly above his seat. It was a woman. She was black, perhaps in her late 40s, wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and dark trousers that looked comfortable but expensive. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant low bun. She was currently standing, lifting a heavy leather portfolio into the bin. Alistair cleared his throat loudly. "Excuse me." The woman paused and looked down. Her eyes were calm, framed by thin gold-rimmed glasses. "Yes." "You are blocking my seat," Alistair said, his voice dripping with irritation. "And that bin is reserved for seat 1A. Specifically, me." The woman smiled politely, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, the bins are shared in the first row, sir. My seat is right here in 1B. There's plenty of room for both." I don't share, Alistair sneered. Move it. Put it back in economy where it belongs. The cabin went silent. The flight attendant, a seasoned purser named Beatrice, with 20 years of flying experience, hurried over. She had seen Alistair's name on the manifest, and had been dreading this moment. Mr. Sterling, Beatrice said, her voice soothing but firm. Is there a problem? Yes, Beatrice, there is, Alistair said, reading her name tag with disdain. This individual is cluttering my personal space. I specifically requested a private environment. I cannot have someone shuffling papers and breathing down my neck for 7 hours. Move her. The woman in 1B slowly lowered her arm. She didn't look angry. She looked curious. She turned to Alistair, her voice steady and low. Sir, I have paid for my ticket, just as you have. My bag is within the regulation size. I suggest you take your seat so we can depart on time. Alistair laughed, a harsh, barking sound. You paid, did you now? Or was this an affirmative action upgrade, a charity seat? The air in the cabin seemed to vanish. A young couple in row 2 exchanged horrified looks. Mr. Sterling, Beatrice interjected, stepping between them. That is inappropriate. This passenger is a valued customer just like you. Please take your seat. I will not, Alistair declared, slamming his hand against the bulkhead wall. I am Alistair Sterling. I spend $500,000 a year with this airline. I demand you move her to the back. Put her in business. Put her in the cargo hold, for all I care. But I want 1B empty. Or I want a different neighbor. Someone who fits the aesthetic of first class. The woman whose name was Dr. Olivia Bennett finally fully turned to face him. She wasn't intimidated. She adjusted her glasses again. Mr. Sterling, Olivia said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously calm. I am going to give you one chance to sit down and be quiet. You have no idea who I am. And frankly, your ignorance is the only thing protecting you right now. Alistair leaned in his face, inches from hers. I know exactly what you are. You're a nuisance. Now get up. Beatrice the purser was shaking. In her 2 decades of flying, she had dealt with drunks, minor celebrities, and crying toddlers, but she had never seen such naked, virulent aggression in the first-class cabin. Sir, Beatrice said, her voice hardening, you are delaying the flight. If you do not sit down, I will have to inform the captain. Go ahead, Alistair shouted, throwing his arms up. Get the captain. Tell him Alistair Sterling is being harassed by the staff and a passenger who refuses to follow protocol. In fact, get him out here right now. I want to look him in the eye when I tell him I'm pulling my corporate contract with this airline. Olivia sighed. It was a long, tired sound. She reached into her purse and pulled out a phone, but she didn't make a call. She simply placed it on the armrest screen, down. She sat down in seat 1B, crossed her legs, and opened a file folder labeled Federal Aviation Administration, Regulatory Oversight Committee. Alistair saw her sit and turned purple. Are you ignoring me? I am ignoring your tantrum, yes, Olivia said without looking up. I'm reviewing the quarterly safety audits for the transatlantic corridor. It's quite fascinating. Did you know that pilot fatigue is up 4% this quarter? You're certainly contributing to the stress levels. Alistair sputtered. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number. I'm calling the CEO. I know Richard. We played golf at Augusta last month. You're finished. Both of you. At that moment, the cockpit door opened. Captain James Miller stepped out. He was a tall man, with broad shoulders and a no-nonsense demeanor. He adjusted his cap and looked at the scene, Alistair red-faced and standing, Olivia calm and seated, and Beatrice looking on the verge of tears. "What is going on back here?" Captain Miller asked, his voice projecting authority. "Captain," Alistair pointed a finger at Olivia. "This woman is refusing to move. She's aggressive, she's rude, and frankly she's a security risk. I don't feel safe flying with her. I want her off the plane." Captain Miller looked at Olivia. She looked back at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. She didn't say a word. She just tapped her index finger on the folder in her lap. Captain Miller blinked. He squinted at the woman. Then his eyes went wide. The color drained from his face. "Ma'am?" Captain Miller said, his voice suddenly very gentle. Is everything all right?" "I'm fine, Captain," Olivia said smoothly. "Mr. Sterling here seems to be having a medical episode, or perhaps a behavioral one. He seems to believe he owns the aircraft." "I demanded she be moved," Alistair interrupted, oblivious to the change in the captain's demeanor. "Captain, if you don't remove her, I will personally ensure you are flying cargo planes to Alaska by next week. Do you know who I am?" "Captain." Miller looked at Alistair with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "I know who you are, Mr. Sterling, but I don't think you know who she is." "I don't care who she is," Alistair screamed. "She's a nobody, a diversity hire, That's enough," Captain Miller barked. The command was so sharp it silenced the cabin. "Mr. Sterling, you have violated federal aviation regulations regarding the interference with a flight crew. You are disrupting the safety and order of this flight." "I'm the victim here," Alistair insisted. "She's the one, sir," Olivia spoke up, closing her folder with a snap. "You mentioned you know Richard, the CEO of this airline." "I do," Alistair sneered, "and he's going to hear about this." "Good," Olivia said. She picked up her phone. "Because I'm having dinner with him and his wife Susan in London tomorrow night. We're discussing the renewal of the airline's operating license for the European sector. But I suppose I could call him now." Alistair froze. "What? You see—" Olivia continued, standing up slowly. She smoothed her sweater. "My name is Dr. Olivia Bennett. I am the chairwoman of the International Aviation Oversight Board. I don't just regulate this airline, Mr. Sterling. I regulate the skies you fly in. I sign off on the safety protocols, the route allocations, and the executive board appointments. And currently, I am evaluating whether this airline has sufficient protocols to handle disruptive passengers who threaten the safety of the crew." The silence that followed was heavy, thick, and suffocating. Alistair stared at her. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The arrogance that had fueled him seconds ago was rapidly being replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He looked at the captain. Captain Miller nodded solemnly. "She's the boss's boss, Mr. Sterling. Actually, she's everyone's boss." I didn't know," Alistair stammered, his voice shrinking. "Ignorance is not a defense, Mr. Sterling," Olivia said coldly. "It is merely an embarrassment. You wanted me moved. You wanted me off the plane." She looked at the captain. "Captain Miller," Olivia said. "I believe this passenger constitutes a security threat. He has been verbally abusive to the crew, he has made threats against your employment, and he has disrupted the pre-flight safety checks. Under FAA Regulation 91.11, no person may assault, threaten, intimidate, or interfere with a crew member. Do you agree?" Captain Miller didn't hesitate. "I do, Dr. Bennett." "Then I believe," Olivia said, her eyes locking onto Alistair's terrified face, "that it is time for Mr. Sterling to leave." Alistair's face went pale. "You can't do this. I have meetings in London, essential meetings, and I have a dinner to get to, Olivia said, sitting back down and opening her folder. And I prefer not to be late. Captain Miller turned to Alistair. Sir, grab your bags. You are being deplaned. No. Alistair grabbed the armrest. I refuse. I'm not going anywhere. Then we will call the Port Authority police, Beatrice said, her voice laced with a newfound confidence. She reached for the interphone. Don't you dare, Alistair hissed. But the look in Olivia's eyes stopped him. It wasn't anger. It was total, absolute indifference. To her, he wasn't a titan of industry. He was a glitch in the system, and glitches were removed. The sound of heavy boots echoed from the jet bridge. 2 Port Authority officers appeared at the door. There a problem, Captain? The lead officer asked. Yes, Captain Miller said, pointing at Alistair. We have a disruptive passenger refusing to deplane. He has threatened the crew and harassed a federal official. The officer looked at Alistair. Sir, let's go. The easy way or the hard way? Alistair looked around the cabin. He saw the faces of the other passengers, people he considered his peers looking at him with disgust. He saw the young couple in row 2 filming him with their phones. He saw Beatrice crossing her arms, a look of triumph on her face. And he saw Dr. Olivia Bennett reading her report, not even looking at him. He grabbed his jacket. He grabbed his bag. You will hear from my lawyers, he muttered as he shoved past the officers. This isn't over. Oh, Mr. Sterling, Olivia said, just loud enough for him to hear as he reached the door. He turned back, sweat beading on his forehead. It hasn't even started. The door closed behind him. The cabin erupted into applause. Olivia didn't smile. She just nodded to Beatrice. Champagne, Dr. Bennett? Beatrice asked. Water, please, Beatrice. Sparkling. No ice. But as the plane taxied to the runway, leaving a fuming billionaire on the tarmac, Olivia knew that Alistair Sterling wasn't the type of man to let this go. He would strike back, and she would be ready. The walk from the jet bridge back to the terminal felt like a funeral procession for Alistair's ego. The Port Authority officers escorted him to the public concourse, their faces stoic, treating him not as a billionaire media mogul, but as a common nuisance. People stared. A teenager in a hoodie pointed. Alistair kept his head down, clutching his Toomey bag so tightly his knuckles turned white. Once he cleared the security checkpoint and burst out into the muggy New York air, the humiliation calcified into something colder and sharper, pure, unadulterated rage. His driver, a burly man named Gus, was waiting with the black Maybach. Gus opened the door, sensing the radioactive mood of his boss, and said nothing. Alistair threw himself into the back seat. Get me to the office, now! Sir, I thought you were going to London, Gus asked, checking the rearview mirror. Change of plans, Gus. Just drive, Alistair snapped. As the car merged onto the Van Wyck Expressway, Alistair pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. He dialed a number he reserved for only the dirtiest of jobs. Preston, Alistair barked the moment the line clicked. I have a situation. Preston Ford was the editor-in-chief of the Daily Clarion, a tabloid that Alistair owned. It was a paper famous for destroying reputations with headlines printed in size 72 font. Talk to me, boss. Preston's voice was slick like oil on water. I was just kicked off flight AA2 to London. A woman, a bureaucrat named Olivia Bennett, orchestrated it. She claims she's the chairwoman of the Aviation board. She used her position to intimidate the captain and have me removed. Bennett, Preston mused. Dr. Olivia Bennett. That's a heavy hitter, Alistair. She's squeaky clean. Harvard, MIT, former pilot. She's the Iron Lady of the skies. Nobody is squeaky clean, Alistair screamed, spittle hitting the leather upholstery. I want her buried, Preston. I want a dig team on her past immediately. Ex-husband's unpaid parking tickets, angry interns, find me something. We can do that, but it takes time. What's the angle for tomorrow's paper? Alistair looked out the window at the grime of queens passing by. He narrowed his eyes. We don't wait for the truth. We make it. I want the headline to read, Aviation boss abuses power, kicks elderly passenger off flight for sitting in her shadow. Elderly. Preston hesitated. You're 55, boss. You're in your prime. For the narrative, Preston, I am a vulnerable senior citizen. She was aggressive. She was hysterical. She played the race card. Spin it however you want, but make her look unstable. I want the narrative to be that she is an out-of-control diversity hire who is terrorizing paying customers. Got it, Preston said, the sound of a keyboard clacking in the background. I'll have a draft in 20 minutes. We'll blast it on the online portal within the hour. It'll be trending before she even lands in London. Alistair hung up. He wasn't done. He scrolled through his contacts until he found Richard Caldwell, CEO, Sky High Airlines. He didn't call. He texted. Richard, your staff just humiliated me. Your regulator, Olivia Bennett, is out of control. Fix this or I pull the advertising contracts. All of them. Millions, Richard. Call me. He tossed the phone onto the seat next to him. He leaned back, closing his eyes. He pictured Olivia Bennett's calm, superior face. She thought she had won, because she had the badge. She had the authority. But Alistair had something more dangerous. He had the microphone. And by the time Flight 882 touched down at Heathrow Doctor, Olivia Bennett wouldn't be stepping off a plane as a respected chairwoman. She would be stepping into a meat grinder. 7 hours later, Flight 882 began its descent into London. Inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere had been tranquil. Olivia had worked through the flight, declining the caviar, and the wine sustaining herself on sparkling water and the dense text of aviation statutes. She felt a quiet satisfaction. She had stood her ground, not just for herself, but for the principle of the matter. Men like Alistair Sterling believed the world was a vending machine that only accepted their currency. Occasionally it was necessary to remind them that the machine could also tip over and crush them. Beatrice the purser stopped by seat 1B as the fasten seatbelt sign dinged on. Dr. Bennett, Beatrice whispered, leaning in. I just wanted to thank you again. In 20 years, nobody has ever stood up for us like that. The crew, we really appreciate it. Olivia offered a warm, genuine smile, a stark contrast to the steel mask she had worn earlier. You did the hard work, Beatrice. You kept the cabin safe. I just quoted the rule book. Captain Miller radioed ahead, Beatrice added, her voice dropping lower. He arranged for a VIP escort for you at the gate, just to speed you through customs. That wasn't necessary, but it is appreciated. Thank you. The plane landed smoothly, taxiing through the grey English drizzle. Olivia packed her files, checked her phone, and frowned. She had 0 signal. Strange. Usually her global roaming kicked in immediately. She restarted the device as the plane pulled up to the gate. When the signal finally connected, her phone nearly vibrated out of her hand. 47. Missed calls, 112. Text messages, 3,000+ notifications on X, formerly Twitter. She stared at the screen, her brow furrowing. The first text was from her deputy director in Washington, D.C. Olivia, don't talk to anyone. Legal is convening an emergency meeting. What happened on that plane? The second text was from her daughter. Mum, why are you trending? Who is Alistair Sterling? Olivia felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She opened her browser. The headline on the front page of the Global News Network, a Sterling subsidiary, screamed at her. Sky Rage, top aviation official, accused of assaulting passenger and abusing federal power. Below it was a grainy photo. It was from the plane, but the angle was manipulated. It showed Olivia standing over Alistair, her finger pointing her face, looking severe. Alistair was seated, looking small and defensive. The caption read, Olivia Bennett berates media mogul Alistair Sterling, moments before ordering his removal. Oh, you petty little man, she whispered. Dr. Bennett. She looked up. A British Airways ground agent was standing at the aircraft door, looking anxious. The VIP car is waiting at the bottom of the stairs. We thought it best to bypass the main terminal. Why? Olivia asked, standing up and hoisting her bag. Because, Ma'am, the press is here. A lot of them. Olivia straightened her blazer. She put her glasses on. She didn't cower. She didn't hide her face. Let's go. They took a side exit down the metal stairs to the tarmac, where a black Range Rover was waiting. But Alistair's reach was long. As she stepped into the cool London air, a swarm of photographers who had gained access to the perimeter fence began shouting. Dr. Bennett, did you strike Mr. Sterling? Is it true you used racial slurs against him? Are you resigning? Flashbulbs popped like lightning in the grey afternoon. Olivia ignored them, sliding into the back of the car. The door slammed shut, silencing the chaos. Inside the car sat a man she knew well. Richard Caldwell, the CEO of Sky High Airlines. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 7 hours. He was holding a tablet, watching a video of a news anchor, destroying Olivia's career. Richard, Olivia said calmly. It's good to see you, though I assume we're skipping the pleasantries. Richard didn't look at her. He stared out the window at the rain. He's pulling the ads, Olivia. He's threatening to sue the airline for $10 million for breach of contract and emotional distress. He's got half the board of directors calling for my head because I let my captain kick off a platinum partner. Your captain followed federal safety regulations, Olivia said, her voice hard. Alistair was a threat. Alistair is a monster, Richard snapped, finally turning to her. We both know that. But he's a monster who buys ink by the barrel. Do you see this? He shoved the tablet at her. He has witnesses. He paid off a couple in row 2. They gave statements, saying you were hostile and erratic. Olivia looked at the screen. It was a lie, a complete fabrication. But it was moving fast. The comments section was a cesspool of hate. So what are you telling me, Richard? Olivia asked quietly. Are you rescinding the dinner invitation? Richard sighed, rubbing his temples. The board wants me to issue a public apology to Alistair. They want me to state that the airline regrets the incident and that the crew overreacted under your pressure. If you do that, Olivia said, her voice dropping to a whisper, you are undermining every flight crew in the industry. You are telling your pilots that money outranks safety. You are telling your flight attendants that they have to tolerate abuse if the passenger is rich enough. If you issue that apology, Richard, you aren't just betraying me. You're betraying your own people. Richard looked at her, his eyes pleading. I have shareholders, Olivia. Stock dropped 4% since the news broke this morning. I have to stop the bleeding." "Then let it bleed," Olivia said. "Because if you side with him, I won't just be the regulator you have dinner with. I will be the regulator who audits every single maintenance log you have filed since 1995. I will ground your fleet for a missing screw." The car was silent. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the rain on the roof. "He's going to destroy you, Olivia," Richard warned softly. "He has the tapes, the papers, the internet. You're one woman against a media empire." Olivia looked out the window at the grey London skyline. She thought of the fear in Beatrice's eyes. She thought of the arrogance in Alistair's voice. "I'm not just one woman, Richard," she said, pulling her phone out again. "I'm the woman who knows where the bodies are buried. Alistair thinks this is a PR battle. He thinks it's about headlines." She dialed a number. "Who are you calling?" Richard asked. "The one person Alistair Sterling is actually afraid of," Olivia said. "His ex-wife. The one who signed the NDA he's currently violating by running this smear campaign." She put the phone to her ear. "Hello, Catherine, it's Olivia. Yes, I'm in London. No, I'm fine, but I think it's time we finally had that conversation about the Cayman accounts. Yes, the ones he hid from the divorce lawyers. Meet me at the Dorchester in an hour." She hung up and looked at Richard. A small, cold smile touched her lips. "Drive me to the hotel, Richard. The war has just begun." The Dorchester Hotel on Park Lane stood like a fortress of old-world money against the grey London drizzle. Inside, the air smelled of lilies and expensive perfume. Dr. Olivia Bennett walked through the lobby, her heels clicking on the marble with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. She wasn't wearing her flight attire anymore. She had changed into a sharp navy blue power suit that made her look less like a bureaucrat and more like a prosecutor. She found Catherine Sterling sitting in a secluded corner of the promenade, the hotel's tea room. Catherine was a woman who had once been a beauty queen, but 20 years of marriage to Alistair had etched deep lines of anxiety around her eyes. She wore oversized sunglasses indoors and clutched a glass of sherry with a trembling hand. "Olivia," Catherine breathed as Dr. Bennett sat down. She didn't offer a hand. She just looked around nervously. "He doesn't know I'm here. If he knew, he'd cut my alimony. He'd burn my house down." "He won't be burning anything, Catherine," Olivia said softly, signaling the waiter to bring water. "Because by tomorrow morning, Alistair won't have the matches, let alone the fuel." Catherine lowered her sunglasses. Her eyes were rimmed with red. "You saw the news he's destroying you. My phone has been blowing up with alerts. He's calling you unstable. He's digging up your divorce from 1998. "Let him dig," Olivia said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "He's fighting a PR war. I'm fighting a legal one. But I need the ammunition, Catherine. You told me once years ago at the Aspen Gala that Alistair had a hobby he kept off the books. You said if you ever left him, you'd take the blue ledger." Catherine froze. She looked down at her Chanel bag. "It's not just a hobby, Olivia. It's a logistics operation." "Explain," Olivia commanded gently. Catherine leaned in her voice a whisper. "Sterling Media ships tons of equipment all over the world. Cameras, satellite uplinks, stage gear. They have a permanent cargo exemption because they are press. They bypass standard customs screening in 30 countries. Alistair uses his private fleet Sterling wings to move the gear." "I know the fleet." Olivia nodded. "I signed their certificate of airworthiness. 2 Gulfstream G650s and a Bombardier cargo jet. Those jets aren't just moving cameras, Catherine said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a heavy encrypted hard drive. For the last 5 years, Alistair has been moving high-value art and uncertified gold bullion out of conflict zones in Africa and South America. He hides it inside the hollowed-out casings of the broadcast servers. He calls it asset relocation. I call it smuggling. Olivia stared at the hard drive. The noise of the hotel, the clinking china, the murmur of conversation seemed to fade away. This wasn't just about a rude passenger anymore. This wasn't just about Alistair being a bully. This was a federal crime. It was a violation of international aviation treaties. And it was happening on planes she regulated. He falsifies the manifests, Olivia asked, her mind racing through the legal implications. Every single one, Catherine confirmed. He forges the weight ratios. He bribes the ground crews in Lagos and Bogota. But he keeps the real records. He's obsessive, Olivia. He writes down every ounce of gold, every stolen painting, because he doesn't trust his partners. It's all in here. Dates, flight numbers, payload weights, and the names of the politicians he pays off to look the other way. Olivia placed her hand over the hard drive. The plastic felt cold. Why give this to me now, Catherine? Olivia asked. You could have gone to the FBI years ago. Catherine looked up, tears finally spilling over. Because the FBI can be bought. Alistair has friends in the Justice Department. But you're the FAA. You're the ICAOB. You control the sky. And today he humiliated you. He made the mistake of attacking the one woman who can actually ground him. Catherine pushed the drive across the table. He thinks he's a god, Olivia. He thinks the world is his playground. Please, show him he's just a passenger. Olivia took the drive and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't smile. She didn't look triumphant. She looked like a judge delivering a death sentence. Go to your sister's house in Cornwall, Catherine, Olivia said, standing up. Turn off your phone. Don't watch the news tonight. Why? Because, Olivia said, adjusting her blazer. I'm going to make a phone call to the International Air Transport Association and the Department of Homeland Security. And when the storm hits, I don't want you to get wet. The clock on the wall of the penthouse suite, a rare minimalist piece by Patek Philippe, ticked past 2:15 a.m. London lay beneath Alistair Sterling, a sprawling grid of wet pavement and slumbering commoners. From the 45th floor of his Knightsbridge residence, the city looked less like a metropolis and more like a circuit board, one that he usually controlled. Alistair stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, pressing his forehead against the cold, reinforced glass. In his hand, a crystal tumbler of Macallan 52, priced at roughly $4,000 a pour, swirled gently. He took a sip, the liquid fire settling the nerves that had been fraying since he stepped off Flight 882. He turned back to the room. It was a cavernous space of Italian marble and black leather, illuminated only by the ghostly blue glow of 6 high-definition monitors mounted on the far wall. They were his war room. And tonight, they were showing a victory. The smear campaign he had orchestrated was not just working. It was a symphony of destruction. The trending topics on social media were dominated by the narrative he had crafted. #FireBennett was the #1 hashtag in the UK and the US. His tabloid, The Daily Clarion, had just run an exclusive from an anonymous source claiming Dr. Bennett had a history of medically diagnosed hysteria and anti-corporate bias. It was a lie entirely fabricated by Preston's team, But in the court of public opinion, truth was merely a suggestion. Alistair smiled, a thin, cruel curving of his lips. He picked up his tablet to check his email. There it was. The draft apology from Richard Caldwell. Sky High Airlines deeply regrets the unfortunate incident involving Mr. Sterling. We acknowledge that crew protocols were misapplied due to external pressure from a federal regulator. We are reviewing our relationship with Dr. Bennett. Perfect, Alistair whispered to the empty room, his voice echoing slightly off the hard surfaces. You stupid, arrogant woman. You thought a badge made you a god I buy gods. The adrenaline of the kill was intoxicating, more potent than the scotch. He felt invincible. He felt the sudden manic urge to consume, to purchase, to prove his dominance over the material world. He sat down at his desk, opening his laptop. He navigated to the Sotheby's private auction portal. There it was. Lot 402. A 1964 Aston Martin DB5 Silver Birch, previously owned by a minor royal. The current bid was £2.8 million. Chump change, Alistair muttered. He typed in a bid of £3.2 million. He wanted it. He deserved it. It would be his trophy for surviving the day. He hovered his finger over the submit bid button, savoring the moment. Click. The screen displayed a spinning wheel. Alistair leaned back, imagining driving the car through the English countryside, perhaps running Olivia Bennet off the road in his mind. The wheel stopped. A red box appeared in the center of the screen. Transaction declined. Contact issuer. Alistair frowned. He blinked, assuming he had misread it. He refreshed the page. He entered the bid again. Transaction declined. Code 05. Do not honor. Ridiculous. He spat, slamming the laptop shut. Useless technology. It had to be a glitch, a security algorithm tripping over itself because of the late hour or the location. He reached into his wallet and pulled out the card. The American Express Centurion. The black card. It was made of anodized titanium. It had no spending limit. It was the key that unlocked the world. He dialed the dedicated concierge number on the back. It usually rang once before a human picked up. Tonight it rang 4 times. Concierge services. A voice answered. It wasn't the usual cheerful, obsequious tone. The voice sounded stiff, guarded. This is Alistair Sterling, he barked. I'm trying to buy a car and your incompetence is embarrassing me. The card is declining. Fix it. Override the security hold immediately. Silence stretched on the line. Heavy, static-filled silence. Mr. Sterling, the operator said finally. I cannot override this hold, sir. What do you mean you can't? Do you know who I am? I spend $10 million a year on this card. I want your supervisor. Sir, my supervisor is standing right here. The operator's voice trembled slightly. We have received a flag on your account. It's not a bank hold, Mr. Sterling. It's a federal freeze. Alistair froze. The glass of scotch in his hand tilted dangerously. A freeze from who? The IRS. No, sir. The code is 44 Alpha. That comes from the Office of Foreign Assets Control in the United States cooperating with the UK Treasury. It's a sanctions and anti-money laundering block. It freezes everything. Credit, debit, liquid assets, holding companies. Sir, I'm technically not even supposed to be speaking to you. The line went dead. Alistair stared at the phone. OFAC. That was for terrorists, for drug lords, for dictators of rogue states. not for media tycoons. A cold knot of dread formed in his stomach, tight and painful. He scrambled for his phone again, his fingers fumbling over the screen. He opened his banking app. Access denied. He opened his investment portfolio. User suspended. He dialed his CFO, Marcus. Straight to voicemail. He dialed his personal lawyer. Straight to voicemail. Panic, sharp and jagged, began to shred his composure. He dialed Preston Ford, his editor-in-chief in New York. "Pick up, pick up, pick up," Alistair hissed, pacing the room. "Boss?" Preston answered on the third ring. He sounded breathless. In the background, Alistair could hear shouting, the sound of heavy objects being moved, and the wail of sirens. "Preston. My accounts are frozen. The credit cards aren't working. What the hell is happening? Boss, you need to..." Preston's voice was cut off by a loud crash. "You need to get out of there. They're here. The FBI is here." "Where?" "At the office in Manhattan. They just kicked in the server room doors." Preston screamed. "They have a warrant, Alistair. A federal warrant for the Sterling Wings logistics data. They're taking the physical drives. They're saying something about the Blue Ledger." The blood drained from Alistair's face so fast it left him dizzy. He dropped into his leather chair. The Blue Ledger. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. No one knew that name. No one. That was the internal code name for the encrypted partition on his private servers. The partition where he kept the real manifests. The records of the uncertified gold bullion from the Congo. The blood diamonds from Sierra Leone. The stolen Renaissance art from the private collections of toppled dictators. He had hidden the contraband inside the hollowed-out casings of his broadcast equipment, flying them around the world on his private jets under the guise of press freedom. It was the perfect crime. The customs agents never checked the heavy server racks of a major media corporation. Only one other person knew the name Blue Ledger. Catherine, his ex-wife. The woman he had bullied into silence. The woman he had discarded like a used napkin. She gave it to her. Alistair whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. She gave it to Bennett. Boss, are you there?" Preston was yelling. "They're asking for the flight logs for the G650. They're asking about the pilot in command." Alistair hung up. He threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the marble floor, but didn't break. He had to run. The freeze meant his money was gone, but he had emergency cashes. He had a safe deposit box in Dubai. He had gold bars in a vault in Zurich. But he had to get there. He grabbed a burner phone from his desk drawer, one he kept for his mistresses, and dialed the only number that could save him. "Richard." Alistair gasped when the line connected. "Richard, listen to me carefully." "Alistair." Richard Caldwell's voice was weary. "It's 2:30 in the morning. I don't care what time it is, I need a plane. I need my plane. The G650 is in the hangar at Heathrow. I need you to authorize an emergency takeoff slot. File a flight plan for Dubai. Tell them it's a medical evacuation. I don't care what you tell them. Just get at me in the air." There was a long silence on the other end. Alistair could hear Richard breathing. "I can't do that, Alistair. Don't you dare tell me you can't!" Alistair screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "I made you Richard. I have the photos from the island. I will ruin you. Launch the damn jet." "I can't launch it, Alistair," Richard shouted back, his voice finally breaking through the subservience. "Because it's not just your plane anymore. The FAA and the EASA just issued a global grounding order for the entire Sterling Wings fleet. They revoked the certificates of airworthiness 5 minutes ago." Alistair gripped the edge of the desk. Revoked on what grounds? International trafficking, safety violations, gross negligence. Richard paused, and his voice dropped to a terrified whisper. Alistair, the order was signed by the chairwoman herself. She personally flagged your tail numbers as hostile assets. If your pilots try to start the engines, they will be arrested on the tarmac. She can't do this, Alistair shrieked. She's just a bureaucrat. She's the regulator, Alistair. She owns the sky, and she just closed it. Click. Alistair stared at the dead phone. The silence of the penthouse was suddenly broken by a new sound. It came from outside, down on the street. Whoop, whoop. The sharp, piercing chirp of a siren. Then another. Then a cacophony. Alistair ran to the window. He looked down from his glass tower. The street below, usually dark and quiet, was awash in blue and red light. A convoy of black vans had screeched to a halt in front of the building. Men in heavy tactical gear were pouring out, carrying battering rams and assault rifles. The intercom on his wall buzzed. It was the doorman downstairs. "Mr. Sterling, police, they—" The voice was cut off by the sound of shouting and the crash of a heavy door being breached. Alistair backed away from the window. He looked around his penthouse. The marble, the art, the expensive scotch. It all looked like a stage set now, a fake world built on stolen gold and intimidation. Heavy boots thundered in the hallway outside his suite. Boom. The front doors of his penthouse shuddered. "Police, open up!" Boom. The wood splintered. Alistair didn't move. He couldn't. He was paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of it. He was Alistair Sterling. This didn't happen to him. This happened to poor people. This happened to people who sat in economy. The doors burst open. A dozen officers from the National Crime Agency swarmed the room, weapons raised, their voices a blur of commands. "Hands, show me your hands! Get on the ground now!" Alistair was seized. Rough hands grabbed his bespoke silk pajamas, twisting his arms behind his back. The cold steel of handcuffs bit into his wrists, a sensation so foreign, so violative, that he gasped. They dragged him out of the suite, past the shattered door frame, past the terrified neighbors peeking out. They hauled him into the elevator and down 45 floors. When they shoved him out into the cool London night, the flashbulbs blinded him. But these weren't the paparazzi he paid. These were police photographers. The officer pushing him toward the transport van paused for a moment to adjust his grip. In that second, Alistair looked up. Across the street, standing next to an unmarked black sedan, was a figure. A woman. She was holding a large black umbrella against the drizzle. She was wearing a trench coat belted tightly. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't frowning. She was simply watching. Their eyes locked. Even from the distance, Alistair felt the weight of her gaze. It was the same look she had given him on the plane when he demanded she move. A look of absolute, unshakable certainty. She held a phone to her ear, but she wasn't speaking. She was just looking at him. As the officers shoved Alistair into the back of the van, forcing his head down, he felt a vibration in the pocket of his pajama bottoms. The burner phone. He hadn't dropped it. The heavy doors of the police van slammed shut, plunging him into darkness. He managed to contort his body, his handcuffed hands fumbling to pull the phone partially out of his pocket, to see the screen glowing in the dark. One new message. Sender Dr. Olivia Bennett. He squinted at the text, his breath hitching in his throat. Seat 1A is now available, but I don't think you can afford the ticket anymore. Alistair Sterling closed his eyes and leaned his head against the metal wall of the van. The siren wailed a long, mournful sound that signaled the end of the flight. The fall of Alistair Sterling wasn't just a news story. It was a cultural event. In the weeks following the raid on his London penthouse, the Sterling Empire didn't just crumble, it vaporized. The forensic accounting team, armed with Catherine's hard drive, uncovered a labyrinth of corruption that spanned 3 continents. The gold smuggling was just the tip of the iceberg. There was tax evasion, bribery of foreign officials, and massive violations of international trade sanctions. The media, which Alistair had controlled for so long, turned on him with the vicious enthusiasm of a liberated prisoner. The very newspapers he owned were forced to print the headlines of his disgrace to save their own credibility. The photos of him being led into the Old Bailey court in handcuffs, looking haggard and unshaven, replaced the pristine, airbrushed headshots he had mandated for decades. The trial was the spectacle of the year. Alistair's defense team, a phalanx of London's most expensive barristers, tried to paint him as a victim of a corporate conspiracy. They argued that he was unaware of the logistics of his own private fleet, that he was a frail man suffering from altitude-induced delirium during the incident on Flight 882. It might have worked, too, if not for the prosecution's star witness when Dr. Olivia Bennett took the stand. The courtroom went silent. She didn't look like a victim. She wore a simple grey suit, her posture impeccable. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply laid out the facts of aviation law with the precision of a surgeon. Mr. Sterling's behavior on the aircraft was not a medical episode, Olivia stated, looking directly at the jury. It was a manifestation of a belief system, a belief that his comfort superseded the safety regulations that protect us all. He believed he was above the law. I am simply here to remind the court that at 35,000 feet, gravity applies to everyone equally. And on the ground, so does justice. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Fraud, smuggling, endangerment of an aircraft. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly followed the case with distaste for Alistair's arrogance, delivered the sentence. Mr. Sterling, you have spent your life looking down on people. You have treated the world as your personal fiefdom. You will now have ample time to reflect on your humility. I am sentencing you to 12 years in Her Majesty's prison, Belmarsh. Belmarsh, the British Guantanamo, a high-security prison for terrorists and the most dangerous criminals. No private cells, no Dom Perignon, and certainly no extra leg room. 6 months later. The visitation room at Belmarsh was cold, smelling of bleach and despair. Alistair sat on a bolted-down plastic chair. He had lost 20 pounds. His silver hair was thin and unkempt. The bespoke Brioni suits were gone, replaced by a grey prison uniform that scratched his skin. He wasn't expecting a visitor. His friends had abandoned him the moment the assets were frozen. His children were suing him for their trust funds. When the heavy steel door opened, he looked up, expecting his lawyer with more bad news. It wasn't his lawyer. Dr. Olivia Bennett stood on the other side of the glass partition. She looked exactly as she had on the plane, calm, professional, unbothered. She picked up the phone receiver. Alistair hesitated, his hand shaking before picking up his own. "Why are you here?" he croaked. His voice was a shadow of its former boom. To gloat, to laugh at the animal in the cage. "I don't gloat, Alistair," Olivia said quietly. "I'm here on business." "Business?" He let out a dry, bitter laugh. "I have no business. You took it all. I'm here to inform you that the Aviation Board has finished its audit of Sterling Wings. she said, sliding a piece of paper against the glass. "We are selling off the fleet to pay the back wages of the pilots and crew you stiffed for the last 6 months. The G650 you were so proud of. It's being repurposed as a medical transport jet for infectious diseases." Alistair stared at her, his jaw tightening. "And," Olivia continued, "I brought you something." She held up a small rectangular object. It was a standard flimsy economy class boarding pass. But the destination didn't say London or New York. It was a souvenir ticket, framed in cheap plastic. "I kept this from your original flight," she said. "Seat 1A. I thought you might want a reminder of the seat that cost you everything." Alistair slammed the phone against the glass. "Get out. You ruined my life." "I was Alistair Sterling." "You were," Olivia corrected, standing up. She looked at him with a gaze that wasn't angry, but filled with a devastating pity. "Now you're just inmate 8940. You wanted me to move seats, Alistair. You wanted me out of your sight. Well, congratulations. You're finally alone." She hung up the phone. As she walked away, the guard came over to escort Alistair back to his cell. "Let's go, Sterling," the guard grunted, grabbing his arm. "Move it." "Don't touch me," Alistair snapped instinctively. "I am—" "You're nobody," the guard interrupted, shoving him forward. "Now get in line. You're sitting in the back of the van today." Alistair stumbled forward, the heavy steel doors clanging shut behind him, sealing him in the darkness he had created for himself. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how Alistair Sterling learned the hardest lesson of his life. He thought his money made him bulletproof. He thought he could snap his fingers and make people disappear. But he forgot the golden rule of travel. You never ever mess with the person holding the rule book. From a private jet lifestyle to a shared cell in Belmarsh, Alistair lost his fortune, his freedom and his dignity. All because he couldn't handle sitting next to a powerful black woman in first class. It's a brutal reminder that character is revealed not by how you treat your equals, but by how you treat people you think are beneath you. In this case, the person he thought was beneath him turned out to be the one flying the plane. I hope you enjoyed this story of high-altitude justice. If you felt a little bit of satisfaction seeing karma hit back that hard, please smash that like button. It really helps the video reach more people. And I want to hear from you. What is the worst behavior you have ever seen on an airplane? Have you ever had to deal with an Alistair in real life? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We post new dramas every week. Until next time, stay humble and fly safe.